And the second one is from Rav Shlomo Volber. Is it all working? Yes, good. Excellent, good. Thank you so much, Yosef, behind the scenes here. Okay, so we're going to learn, just to save time, we're going to learn some halachot concerning Tisha B'Av from the Kitzur Shulchan Aruch. Okay? L'chaim, l'chaim, l'chaim. Fabrizio, thank you so much. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, she'akol niyeh b'dvaro.
Amen.
Oh, that was amazing. Okay. It's interesting because we're learning about a fast day and we're starting with a glass of water. Okay. Kitzur Shulchan Aruch says like this: Kevan shebeshiva asar b'Tammuz hitchilu tzarot harchurban. As we know, on the 17th of Tammuz was the beginning of the end. It's when the Romans breached the walls of the old city. Lachein, therefore, nogim ketzat avelut miyom zeh ad achar Tisha B'Av, and therefore we have a custom to mourn for the 3-week period from the 17th of Tammuz until the 9th of Av. In fact, people call that period the 3 weeks. Do you know why it's called the 3 weeks? Because it's 3 weeks. Okay. And what do we do? So a few little things here. Ein nosim nashim. You're not allowed to get married during these 3 weeks. Yisrael, if there's a Jew, sheparnasa shelo b'chlei zemer. Oh, this is for you, Micha. If there's a Jew who plays an instrument, and that's his source of livelihood, mutar lezamer bebeit she'eno yehudi kedei parnasato ad rosh chodesh. So they can play their musical instrument because that's really his livelihood, and he can continue that until Rosh Chodesh Av. So at this stage of the game, he would have had to have stopped. Aval mi Rosh Chodesh ad achar ta'anit asur. You're not allowed to play music at all. V'yom Shiva Asar b'Tammuz atzmo gam kein asur. And Shiva Asar b'Tammuz, the day of Shiva Asar b'Tammuz, is also forbidden. 2 little things that I want to mention on this first halakha. The first thing is, it says you're not allowed to get married during these days, right? Ein nosim nashim. However, the Mishnah Berurah points out, and others also mention, you are allowed to get engaged during these days. You're not allowed to get married because marriage is this big simcha of the wedding feast, and you can always celebrate the marriage afterwards. But when you get engaged, there's a certain safek. Is it right? Is it? But then when you seal it and say, we're in, so you're allowed to reach that moment during the 3 weeks and to celebrate an engagement. There won't be any music at the celebration, but you're allowed to announce an engagement. You wouldn't be allowed to a marriage. The Mishnah Berurah also points out that we're worried that it's a competitive market. So you want to get engaged to her because you don't want anyone else to try and nab her.
Yeah.
You follow? Okay, that's the first point. The second point I want to speak about is concerning music. The time of the Kitzur Shulchan Aruch, the only music that existed was live music, and therefore they said you don't play live music. There's no music. No music means no live music because there was no music other than live music. So the Kitzur Shulchan Aruch doesn't say you can't listen using your AirPod. Is that what they're called? You can't because they didn't exist at the time. But nowadays, where people listen to recorded music much more than they once did, and it's not really, it's more like background noise as I walk around and get on with my life. So nowadays, many rule, especially if you're somebody who would get depressed if you weren't able to listen to music, you can certainly listen to music that normally just accompanies you so that it's not quiet when you're walking down the street. Like to watch a DVD of a concert would probably not be a good idea. And to put on music just to lighten your spirits. But if you're going on your way and music is sort of what accompanies you on your way, so nowadays many people would allow you to listen to music in private. Okay, that's number one. Number two, This is very odd, this one. Lo yaku hatalmidim or habanim b'yamim eila. You're not allowed to hit your students. You're also not allowed to hit your children during these days. Yes.
Because there's risk of killing them?
Yes. So we're going to come to that in a minute. Very interesting. Yeah?
You thought I was going to ask, are we allowed to?
No. I was a little bit, I did get a little bit concerned about where you were going there, but I feel a bit calmer now, so thank you. But this is not anything to do with, we said that we are commemorating the destruction of the temple. We're mourning from Shiva Asar B'Tammuz until Tisha B'Av, but not hitting people is not a sign of Avelut.
It's because in Av there's a bad mazal.
Excellent. So we're going to see there's different minhagim. Exactly, there is a bad. Well, it's hard to us to understand exactly what it means, but the Mishnah and the Talmud and the Gemara in Ta'anit tell us Mishenichnas Av mema'atim b'simcha, that we reduce in our joy during the month of Av. There's something going on this time of year. That because we don't really understand the concept of mazal, we can't talk about it very much. But we're not taking risks in the same way as you might take risks at other time. Okay, now let's continue. Likewise, we are accustomed, she'ein mistaprin b'yamim elu, as we can all see. We don't cut our hair on our heads, nor do we trim our beards. Lo serot harosh v'lo serot zakan. So if you're a hairdresser, so then for these 3 weeks it's tricky, which is interesting, because we said the musicians continue playing, but the hairdressers close up shop. I have to think about that. Anyway, but this is clearly not to do with taking risks. This is, as we all know, a well-known sign of Avelut. You know that when God forbid, when somebody passes away, you don't cut your hair for at least 30 days afterwards. Yeah. So not cutting your hair, we learn this from Aaron Cohn, when he lost 2 of his sons. We see Avelut, it's one of the signs of Avelut is not cutting your hair. And part of it, I'm not interested in that part of my life at the moment. Sort of how I look. Maybe that could be connected. But this halacha, as opposed to the previous one, is avelut. So we have a mishmash, because the first one, weddings, is obviously avelut. Hitting children is not avelut, but now having haircuts is avelut. Now look at this one. This is very, very interesting. The last one here. No hagim, there is a minhag. She'ein mevarachim shehechiyanu. Do you ever hear about this? That you don't say shehechiyanu during the 3 weeks. Why? If you're not going to say Shehechiyanu, that would mean you shouldn't be buying new clothes. Why? Because if you buy new clothes, you need to say Shehechiyanu. You follow? So I'm not buying new clothes, not buying new fruit either, but I'm not buying new items, because if I were to buy new items, I would need to say Shehechiyanu. And I don't want to say Shehechiyanu during these days. Why?
Because the text of the bracha is like blessed.
Exactly. So that is based here.
Blessed to which this occasion.
Exactly. Excellent. This moment, exactly. So the Sefer HaChasidim says like this: Yesh mea Chasidim Rishonim, and this statement from the Sefer HaChasidim, which is a book written in the time of the Rishonim, writes. Yesh mea Chasidim Rishonim shelo hayu ochlim pri chadash bein Yud Zayin b'Tammuz l'Tisha B'Av. They wouldn't eat new fruit. Why? Ki amru eich nevarech shehechiyanu v'kimanu l'zman hazeh v'uzman puranot. How could you recognize this moment when this is a bad moment? You follow? So this really exactly what you were saying. I don't want to say thank you God for allowing me to live at this moment, when this moment is not a particularly good moment. You follow? If God forbid, let's say you're at a birth. So you could say, I'm so happy to be here this minute. Indeed, people make the bracha shehechiyanu when a baby boy is born, for that, because I'm so happy to be here at this moment. Yeah. But I would not commemorate this time of year the 3 weeks and say, oh wow, isn't it amazing to be here in this mourning period? And therefore the Sefer HaChasidim rules, we don't say Shechianu. That ruling of the Sefer HaChasidim makes it into the Shulchan Aruch. The Shulchan Aruch rules like this. Tov li zaher milomar Shechianu. We don't say Shechianu, but bein ha-metzarim al pri, neither on fruit nor on clothing. Aval al pijon haben. But if it was a pijon haben, redeeming of a firstborn, on which we do say Shechianu, we would say Shechianu in that situation. Why? Because I didn't choose the timing. Nowadays in Israel, we have a custom to say Shechianu not just at Pidyon Haben, but also to say Shechianu on the Brit Milah. So the same rule would apply. I can't plan the timing of these things, and therefore I would say Shechianu on these things. But in general, when I don't need to, I don't. Why? The reason the Magen Avraham explains, commenting on the Shulchan Aruch, כיוון שהזמן הוא זמן פורענות ואין לברך שהחיינו לזמן הזה, אבל אין הטעם משום אבלות, דהה לא מצאנו שאבל אסור לברך שהחיינו. So the Magen Avraham makes it very, very clear that during the 3 weeks, the 9 days, and even on Tisha B'Av itself, there are 2 areas of halacha that are working simultaneously. There is the avelut, that we are commemorating at this time. I don't cut my hair, I don't listen to music, don't get married. And then in addition, there's also acknowledging that we are at a tricky time. So I don't say Shechianu, we don't hit our children. As a child, my parents never hit us, but as a child, we wouldn't go swimming. Have you heard of that custom, not to go swimming during the 9 days? Yeah. Again, I'm not going to take risks. That's not to do with avelut, it's to do with puranut. I'm worried about what might happen. And then the third, also, people don't fly on airplanes. Have you ever heard about that? There's a custom not to fly during the 9 days, or not to go on a ship during the 9 days. I'm not going to put myself in a tricky situation. Those are the words of the Magen Avraham. However, also commenting on the Shulchan Aruch is the Gaon Mivilna, and he argues. He says, "Chumra yeteruhi de'enan chamrim me'evel yom hamita." According to the Gaon Mivilna, all we need to do during this time period is avelut, and therefore, according to the Gaon Mivilna, we do say Shechianu even during this time period. But what's the argument between them? The argument between the Magen Avraham, who points out that we do commemorate, that this is a tricky time period, and therefore no Shechianu, no swimming, no flying, right, and no hitting our children.
I thought Shechianu was related to the mourning, not the danger.
No, is the danger. Shechianu is the danger. Why? Because I'm saying, Shechianu v'kimanu v'gyanu, thank you God for putting me at this time. But this time is a time of danger.
Oh, so it could backfire.
Yeah, exactly.
Like you get something good, and then you say Shechianu, and then God forbid something.
Yes, I'm so happy I'm here now. It's a bit, I don't know. It's a bit like being in a burning building, and there's things falling down, and say, oh, I'm so happy to be here. But in a minute, something terrible could happen. You follow? I don't want to be here. This is not a good time. You follow?
Okay.
Does that make sense to you? So we have 2 opinions. During the 3 weeks, according to the Magen Avraham, we're doing 2 things in parallel. I'm worried about what might happen in the future, and I am also commemorating mourning on the past. You follow? I'm sort of connected to the past and connected to the future. I'm worried about what might happen, and therefore I'm not going to go swimming. I'm not going to take chances because what might happen. And I'm also not going to cut my hair, and I'm not going to go to a wedding because of what happened. You follow? So for the Magen Avraham it's 2, but according to the Gaon Mivilna, who says that we do say Shechianu during the 3 weeks. Why? Because the 3 week is all about mourning, but it's not about danger. You hear that? the argument between those two positions remains unresolved. I mean, it's a lovely question, but it's not a question that is resolved. Okay, if we turn over to the other side, I want to share with you a second idea, leaving our discussion of danger and mourning, the Gaon Mivilna, the Magin Avraham, leaving that all, and coming now to a wider question of what are we supposed to be thinking on Tisha B'Av. I have to say, I personally found Tisha B'Av to be quite a difficult day until I learned two beautiful ideas, and I'm going to share these two beautiful ideas with you today. And I hope, just like they enhanced my Tisha B'Av after I learned them, I hope they will enhance yours too. Okay, so I'm going to introduce what we said by sharing two things. First thing is, as you may know, in the laws of Tisha B'Av, we are told, and this appears in the Shulchan Aruch, that there's no tachanun on Tisha B'Av. Do you know about that?
Okay.
Now, tachanun is not said on, when do we not say tachanun? Shabbat, we don't say it. Yom Tov, a wedding, Sheva Brachot, Brit Milah, Pesach, Shavuot, Sukkot, festivals, right? Chanukah, Purim, Tu B'Shvat, all the good, exciting days of the year, no tachanun. So Tisha B'Av is also a day where we don't say tachanun. And the Shulchan Aruch explains why no tachanun on Tisha B'Av. And do you know what the Shulchan Aruch says? It's so enigmatic, this statement. It says, we say no tachanun on Tisha B'Av because Tisha B'Av is mo'ed. Do you know what the word mo'ed means?
Set time.
A set time. Good, excellent. But in English, we often like a chol ha'mo'ed. You know, the chol ha'mo'ed is like the intermediate days of a festival. A mo'ed is normally a positive day. So how is it that Tisha B'Av is described as a mo'ed?
They say that Tisha B'Av will going to be a holiday once we build.
Oh, excellent. So is Tisha B'Av a good day or is it a bad day? I mean, for everything we've said until now, mourning, danger, it's bad, right? But then no tachanun, which seems to indicate it's a moed, which is good. So how are we supposed to understand what the day is? Is the day a good day or is the day a bad day?
It depends how you look at it.
Go on.
It's like a lot of bad things, not just the destruction of the temple, have happened on Tisha B'Av.
Mm-hmm.
So how do we rectify with the fact that it's a moed, that it's like a set time, and that it'll become a festival in the future? Is like we have the opportunity now to mourn, but at the same time you can be aware like this is temporary. This is gonna soon be turned on its head, and we're gonna be celebrating. So
Yeah, fair.
We get the chance to mourn our temple, and through that we're like approaching. I don't know exactly.
No, I do see it's sort of like in every sort of moment of despair, there's a little bit of hope. Like it's never all over. It's really like don't give up.
And since we know like what the words of our prophets say, like we have the assurance that it is going to be
Nachon, like Rabbi Akiva, as we read. Right, excellent.
So there's nothing to have despair.
Yeah, fair. That's the truth. That position, the Shemish Shmuel that we will learn in a few minutes on the sheet over here, goes a little bit in that direction to explain the positive part of Tisha B'Av. And we're going to look at that in a minute. And he says something brilliant, but he's really, I think, trying to go according to what you're saying, that there's something good on Tisha B'Av. Yes.
Like imagine B'ezrat Hashem, like some of us here will get to tell our children on Tisha B'Av.
Be'ezrat Hashem, all of us.
All of us can. No, I can, but I mean, we'll all be able to tell our children on Tisha B'Av. I remember when this was a fast day. I remember when we celebrated.
Beautiful, excellent,
I remember
excellent,
it was a fast day.
Great. That's beautiful. We're going to look. I think you'll enjoy the Shemish Shmuel. I want to finish with him because he finishes on a positive note. But I want to start not with the Shemish Shmuel, but with Rav Wolbe. Rav Wolbe, in his book Alei Shur. Just to remind you, Rav Wolbe Alei Shur is the book that we've been learning every week at the beginning of the class when we do like the 10-minute discussion on Musar is from his book. And he says something, it's absolutely brilliant. I hope I'm able to explain it clearly, and if I don't, please ask questions. He explains that the Shulchan Aruch describes Tisha B'Av as a mo'ed, and you very accurately translated the word mo'ed as a fixed time. However, we normally translate, and that's almost the premise of what Micha say now, mo'ed is a good time. You know, like it's coming up for, mo'ed is like a festival. When I hear the word mo'ed, I think Pesach, Shavuot, Sukkot. That's what I think about when I think of mo'ed. I think about fun. I think about good. However, the Alei Shur, Rav Shlomo Wolbe explains, there are two types of mo'ed. One type is a mo'ed of kiruv. A mo'ed of kiruv is like Pesach, or Shavuot, or Sukkot. It's a special time, and at that special time, we feel closer to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And then I'm afraid to say, there's a second type of mo'ed. A mo'ed of Tisha B'Av, where on that day it's called a mo'ed, it's a fixed time. Not because it's a day that we feel closer to God, but rather it's a day that we feel more distant from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That's a really hard thing to say. And then we don't say Tachanun on any day that's a mo'ed. Now, how could I have a mo'ed that causes me to feel distant from HaKadosh Baruch Hu? Now, how is that useful? How is that a fixed time that I want to commemorate? How is that important? You know, what's the purpose of having a day, Tisha B'Av, that I feel further from HaKadosh Baruch Hu than I normally do? Like, how is that useful in my Avodat Hashem? So I want to give you an analogy to understand what a festival of closeness and then a time of distance, what that means. Okay. So imagine a husband and a wife. A husband and a wife, and it's their wedding day. Isn't that beautiful? Can you see them? Are you there? And they're mamash the closest, happiest people in the world on their wedding day. And then you come to a year after the wedding. And a year after the wedding, and they're sitting together, and you ask them, how are you feeling? Do you feel closer now, or do you feel further away than you felt last year? And they'll say, closer, we feel closer. And then let's say you do that after the second year, 2 years they've been married, closer, further away, closer. And then 1 year they ask, just because things have been hard, how do you feel this year? Do you feel, when you commemorate this anniversary, do you feel closer, or do you feel further away? And they say, further away. And you think, oh, boy, that's terrible. Like, things aren't going well. They feel further away. And it's true. Things are not going well. But do you know what's worse? Do you know what's worse than going further away? What's worse than going further away is staying the same. Because staying the same means it's static. It's unchanging. It's just the same. There's no life to it. It's just like zzz, just like static. But when you have a relationship that's got ups and then it's got downs and you go up and you go down, then it shows that the relationship is alive. You follow? So you have a mo'ed, like Pesach, Shavuot, Sukkot, that's good, and then you have a mo'ed like Tisha B'Av, and then you have a mo'ed, and then you have a mo'ed. It shows that our relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu is alive. Sometimes there's an event that brings us closer, and then sometimes things happen and we feel a little bit more distance. But both of those extremes, both of the mo'ed of closeness and the mo'ed of distance, both of those mo'adim teach us that the relationship is alive. You hear? Okay. With that analogy, come back to Tisha B'Av. Rav Wolbe explains, I don't know if you've read Jewish history, but if you've read Jewish history, the end of the Second Temple period was a terrible, terrible time in Jewish history. Things weren't going well. There was corruption. People were paying a fortune to become the high priest. And if you would go into the Jewish homes, it was like static. Like the relationship with God, it wasn't moving. It wasn't like it wasn't coming from inside. There was almost like they were operating on autopilot. But there was no passion, there was no meaning, there was no depth. Though I don't want to speak terrible things about Am Yisrael, but for the purposes of our discussion, I'll explain in very broad strokes, although I'm sure there are many holy Yidden for whom this was not the case. But there were people that were just like on a road, like Shabbat, make Kiddush, but not with your kishkas. It wasn't from inside. They were just like plodding along. And then suddenly, the Second Temple was destroyed, and then that woke everybody up. You follow? It was a bit like HaKadosh Baruch Hu nudging them, saying, hello! And that was a wake-up call. You follow? But it was showing the Jewish people that the relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu isn't static. It's not autopilot. You can't have an autopilot relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It's a mo'ed that is a wake-up call to tell us you have to do something. So let's say with a couple, it's the same. So then what's keeping them together? You follow? But if it gets better, then we need to fix something, and then there's a cycle of things going well and things not a bit more challenging. It shows that the relationship is alive. But when it's just static, what's holding it together? What's there? So there's two types of mo'ed. There's a mo'ed of going up, where things are getting better, Pesach, Shavuot, Sukkot, and there's also a mo'ed when things are going badly. And the mo'ed of things going badly is a wake-up call. Turn off autopilot and be involved, be engaged, do something, fix it. Atem shomim? And that wake-up call is called Tisha B'Av. Atem shomim? So it's a mo'ed. It's a mo'ed, but not in the positive sense of mo'ed, but in the negative sense of mo'ed. Atem shomim? Ma atem choshim al zeh? As I drink my second cup, thank you so much. Huh?
It makes perfect sense. It's like we have this opportunity to look at ourselves in our Avodat Hashem and look at ways we can improve. It's like the Nida period. When we feel further away from Hashem, it makes us long for Him more. We're also like sometimes we learn in the making them. I guess it's Kabbalistic, but like that sometimes when a person gets put in a very low place, it's so they can uplift the fallen sparks. With Tisha B'Av, like we go here, and then why we keep, even though it's been generation after generation, we commemorate Tisha B'Av because we're still remedying that part
Yafeh.
of Jewish history.
Uh-huh.
Hashem, then once we completely make a tikkun, then we won't have to mourn on Tisha B'Av anymore.
That's excellent. It's like on Pesach, I'm serving God from closer from Hitlavut,
Yeah.
but we're still mourning the destruction. So then I'm changing my relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu to fix things that are broken, and that's what I'm doing on Tisha B'Av. Yeah.
No, you put it exactly what I meant. It's just a little thought, I guess.
That's excellent. So the word mo'ed really means just a change, like a fixed time.
Yeah.
Like a change from the drudgery of daily life, which is like passive is the worst. Like a just zzz.
Well, it's whole.
Huh?
The difference between whole and kodesh.
Oh, yafeh ma'od.
Because
Yafeh.
why does Hashem sanctifies with festivals? It's when something is more unique, it's holy.
Yafeh.
The Beit Hamikdash is one place in space. The Cohn Gadol or Kohanim is they're holy. They're separated, and at the same time Moedim.
Yafeh
And
ma'od.
so even though Tish B'Av maybe not what you think of first when you think of like a holy festival, it is holy. We only have one Tisha B'Av a year.
Yeah, it's exactly. It's a very holy day. It's a fixed day where there's a change in the status quo, and every change in the status quo is a mo'ed, and it's a wake-up call. Either a wake-up to get closer or to fix things that are broken. Exactly. Thank you, Micha. Those are the words, the challenging words, but I think the profound words of Rav Shlomo Wolber in his book Alei Shur. So according to him, the word mo'ed is not a positive word. It's a neutral word. It just means a blip. It shows that my relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu is alive. You know what I mean? I don't know whether this is a good analogy. I don't know if this is even true part of it. When your parents shout at you, right?
Yeah.
It's not pleasant, but it means they care. It means you're there.
Yeah.
Anyway. It's about breaking the consistency. I think I'll go back on that. I don't like that analogy so much. I like the marriage one better. That if after 20 years of marriage you feel exactly the same way as you did 20 years ago, that's not good. It means it's not alive. It means it's just been on autopilot. Like nothing's there. You follow? But if there's ups and downs means that it's alive.
When your rabbi yells at you, in the same with
Oh yeah, won't use that one then. Okay, that's one interpretation. That is the interpretation of Alei Shur. The second interpretation of why is Tisha B'Av called a Mo'ed. The second explanation of why it's a Mo'ed, what's the festival, is in the words of Rosh Shmuel Borshin Sokachov, the Shem Shmuel. I want to share with you two pieces of Gemara, and then after that I'll share with you what the Shem Shmuel says. The first piece of Gemara, you may know this already. The Gemara tells us in Bava Batra that concerning the Kruvim, the Kruvim that were above the ark in the Kodesh HaKodashim, right?
Fabricio gave the most amazing drasha on this, on the Krovim, and none of us had ever thought of this before, but do you want to explain? He said that the Krovim were like a chavruta, like two students, because they're looking down together. It's like they're studying together.
Oh, that's so holy.
Yeah, it's right somewhere. Just that.
That's a beautiful idea. So the Gemara actually describes them quite a bit. The Gemara, as you may well know then, the Gemara in Bava Batra says, what were they doing? So, there's two opinions, Rabbi Yochanan and Rabbi Elazar. One of them said they were facing each other. Pneihem ish el achiv. And the other one said, Pneihem labayit, meaning they were facing the outer wall. So either they were facing each other or they weren't facing each other. Well, which one is it? Were they facing each other or were they not facing each other?
This one.
Yeah? Go on.
That they would move around when Hashem was angry with the Jewish people. They would be facing out,
Yes.
and then they would be facing in when there was connection.
Exactly. When the Jewish people were doing Rutzono Shel Makom, when they were doing God's will, the Kruvim faced one another. But one, Bizman, She'en Yisrael Zim Rutzono Shel Makom, they'd be facing apart. Right? Now, that is the Talmud in Bava Batra. There is an amazing teaching from the Gemara in Yuma, who talks about the destruction of the second Beit HaMikdash. And the Gemara tells us, in the name of Resh Lakish, that this was in the first temple because there was no ark in the second temple, when it was the Greeks who entered the first Beit HaMikdash. They went to destroy it. They entered the Kodesh HaKodashim. Based on what we just said in the Gemara in Bava Batra, how would you expect the Kruvim to be when the Greeks entered the Kodesh HaKodashim? Away from each other, of course. Now, that's what I would say if I had not read this Gemara over here. Why? Because at the moment that the temple was being destroyed, that was not a moment of God's pleasure with the Jewish people, but rather it was a moment of anger against the Jewish people. So if where they were facing was an indication of how God felt about the Jewish people, I would have expected them to be facing away when the Greeks entered to destroy the first temple. However, the Gemara in Yuma tells us, B'sha'ah, this is source number 7, B'sha'ah she'nichnesu nachrim leheichal, when they entered the Holy of Holies, Ra'ul Kruvim Ha'me'orin Zeh Bazeh. What does that mean?
They're facing each other.
Yes. The Kruvim were facing one another. Isn't that crazy? How could they? Didn't we? You follow the question?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So Shemish Moore's answer is a beautiful gift to you. I will just preface what he says by telling you another interesting snippet of information in Chassidut. In Chassidut, there is a principle. I don't know if you know, in the olden days, we used to have records. Do you know what a record is?
Yeah.
Vinyl. Have they made a comeback now? Is that right?
Yeah, in California I had a vinyl player.
Huh?
I had a record collection.
Really, that's amazing. I'm so
I
happy.
had a lot of,
So I want to tell you something about a record. Let's say you have a record, right? And then you have like track 1, and then, they go around track 2, track 3. If I took my finger, and don't do this, and I scratch all the way down the record, so then as the record went around the record player, whenever it would get to the scratch, it would be like, yeah, exactly. Thank you. You're brilliant. You would hear the scratch as it comes back again and again and again. Now, in Chassidut, but in many Jewish sources, the Jewish calendar is like a record, and you have like a day like Pesach is a scratch all the way down. So then every year I come back to Pesach. You follow? It's like a cycle. You follow? Every year I come back to commemorate it. And then when there was a miracle of Purim, so then there was a scratch that year from then until eternity. So then every year when I come back to Purim, and your birthday is a scratch for you, and so too for each of us, we have scratches on our records. You understand the analogy? And that's how the Jewish year works, which is it's a cyclical year. Okay, now the problem is that the Shem Shmuel explains, based on some Hasidic teaching, that scratches for all time are only created by positive events. meaning a positive event that happened makes an impression forever. But if something bad happened, evil doesn't have the same presence. Evil hasn't got the same presence as good. So good is eternal. So when something good happens, that's a scratch, it'll be there forever. But evil is transient. It happens, but it disappears. So his question is, if we say that good lasts forever and evil is transient, then how can we ever commemorate a bad event? How can I commemorate Tisha B'Av? Tisha B'Av is a bad day. We just spoke in Alei Shur, and he would disagree with the Shem Shmuel, but Alei Shur spoke about a mo'ed of Kiruv and a mo'ed of Richuk. But according to the Shem Shmuel, there can't be a mo'ed of Richuk. You can only have good things make an impression for all time. But evil is transient. If evil's here today, gone tomorrow. So how can I commemorate Tisha B'Av every year if I'm commemorating something bad? His answer is that on Tisha B'Av I don't commemorate something bad. Rather, on Tisha B'Av I commemorate something good. What am I commemorating that could be possibly good on Tisha B'Av? And he explains like this. I don't know if any of you ever experienced this as children. I imagine you didn't, because you were probably all angels as children, based on your current behavior. Your parents must be saints. Anyway, so when a child, let's say a child misbehaves, so often the way that it works is child misbehaves, and then the parent says something, and then the child starts crying. And do you know what happens when the child starts crying? Often the parent starts crying too. And then the parent embraces the child, and there is a moment of deep, deep, deep intimacy between the parent and the child as the parent educates the child and helps them understand that what they did wasn't the best thing in the world. You follow? Like sometimes when you have to say stuff, or when sometimes you have to point things out, it's hard to hear and it hurts and there could be a lot of tears, but there's actually a moment of deep, deep closeness between the parent and the child in that instant. So the Shem Shmuel explains that on Tisha B'Av I don't commemorate the destruction, because the destruction was just an act of evil committed by our enemies, and an act of evil commemorated by our enemies is transient. It's here today, it is gone tomorrow, we move on, we get up from the ashes. However, what lasts forever is the intimacy between us and HaKadosh Baruch Hu, that hug that we receive from HaKadosh Baruch Hu within the punishment. God is punishing us and we're crying, but just like we're crying, HaKadosh Baruch Hu is crying too. And therefore on Tisha B'Av, I'm commemorating the intimacy that I managed to earn with HaKadosh Baruch Hu as a result of the terrible thing that we did and the punishment. And with that, explains the Shem Shmuel, I now understand why the Talmud in Yuma tells us that the Kruvim were facing one another. Because they were facing one another, that moment was a moment of deep, deep intimacy between us and HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And it's that deep intimacy of that moment that we tap into, that we connect with, and that made an impression for all time. Tem Shomim, isn't that brilliant?
That's amazing.
That's a Shem Shmuel. Ma Tem Choshvim?
There's something came to my mind when I thought of that, is this event, Hashem enabling our enemies to destroy his temple, allows this prophecies that were given through Bilam Harashah and through Moshe Rabbeinu to come to fruition of the exile and then redemption. The fact that the temple was destroyed, it allows that in the future there's just going to be greater glory to Hashem when he brings us back from exile, and we have the rebuilding of the temple, and the Mashiach it's enabling all of that to just give the maximum glory to HaKadosh Baruch Hu.
Oh, wow. It's like a destruction in order to rebuild.
Yeah, that's the sense.
That's very nice. Thank you. I'm going to conclude with a blessing for everybody. We looked at 3 things today. 3 points. Our first point was when we looked at halachot. We compared various halachot. The halacha of I don't shave, I don't go to a wedding, I don't listen to music. That is all aspects of mourning, avelut. But I don't hit, I don't go swimming, I don't say shechianu. Those are not acts of mourning. Those are recognitions. That is my recognition of the fact that this is a tricky time of year. It's a miwad puranut, it's not a great time, and therefore I don't take risks during this tricky time. And I commemorate both aspects of these days by having customs that weave both parts into one thing. So I'm not going to fly, I'm not going to swim, I'm not going to go on a boat, I'm also not going to cut my hair, I'm not going to listen to music, I'm not going to get married, even though the reasons for each of these things might be different. That's the first thing. Then we looked at the Alei Shur, who spoke about a mo'ed being a fixed time. And we spoke about the cycle of life. And we said there are mo'adim that bring us closer, and there are mo'adim in which we feel distant. But both, when I feel distant and when I feel closer, are both indications that my relationship is dynamic. When something is moving, it shows it's alive. And therefore, I commemorate on Tisha B'Av. It's a mo'ed of richuk. It's very hard. It's a day where I feel distance from my Kodesh Baruch Hu, but that awareness of the distance shows me that our relationship is alive, and it's my challenge to take that day and to fix it so that I can return back to where I normally am in our relationship. That's not the third point. That was the second point, and the third point from the Shemish Shmuel, talking about intimacy within destruction. That Hashem, as our parent, hugs us and supports us as He rebukes us. But on Tisha B'Av, my connection to HaKadosh Baruch Hu is not about the mourning, but it's about the intimacy within the relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu that we create as a result of crying together. So allow me to conclude with a blessing for all of us, for the end of this discussion, this shi'ur, but also for the end of this month. This year in particular is a tricky year to commemorate Tisha B'Av. I'd like to pray, Yehi Ratzon, for all of us, that this should be the end, that we should be blessed to see the Geula coming very, very soon, that we should be able to turn our tears of pain into tears of joy, and Hashem oz la'amo yiten, Hashem yivarech damo b'shalom.
Amen.
Yishar koach.
Thank you.